And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Sunday, December 8th, 2024. And as the way things stand on this Sunday late morning, we are going to be watching an area of low pressure come out of the North Pacific, cross the eastern Aleutians, and then pull back up towards St. Matthew Island as we in the Monday. And this is going to force more in the way of a mixed bag of precipitation along areas of the southwest, especially the lower Yukon basin. And then as we go up toward the middle Yukon, just north of the Kuskokwim, up through this region, we have winter storm warnings. Nulato Hills could get as much as 6 to 12 inches of snow. Kaltag, Ruby Galena, 3 to 8 inches of snowfall. And as we go further north, there are various winter weather advisories in effect along areas of the Chukchi Sea coast and extending down here into the lower Yukon. Meanwhile, we have high wind warnings and for portions of the eastern Alaska range, wind advisories for the central west part of the Alaska range. Gobbler's Knob up there, South Dalton Highway, also winter weather advisory as moisture streams northward with this next system. So what happens is we have the one low cross the eastern Aleutians over the southeast Bering, pulling back to the north and west. And then as we get into the midweek period, we'll find another low coming up in a similar track, and then the energy will split. Some of it will go back in a very similar track out here across the Bering, another piece coming eastward into the Gulf. So the weather is going to remain active along the Gulf Coast areas of the west, and then occasionally some of that moisture will penetrate across inland areas. To start Monday morning, IFR conditions likely here across the middle, down through the lower Yukon, areas along the west coast, Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue, Norton Sounds, out towards St. Lawrence down to Nunavik Island, St. Paul. We have then a little weak secondary development enhancing some IFR conditions along a frontal boundary where there is some warmer air aloft there over Kodiak Island, pushing into the western Gulf. By the time we get into Monday afternoon, we have widespread IFR conditions along areas of western Brooks Range, west central interior, Seward Peninsula, Chukchi Sea down through the lower Yukon, westward out into the Bering, and then this frontal system, we find IFR conditions. It's all lower ceilings, lower visibility and precipitation. And again, by the time we get into Tuesday morning, widespread IFR conditions over the Gulf with pockets of IFR coming into the intercoastal mountains up toward Chilkoot White Passes, up into Yakutat Bay around Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai, back out here toward areas of the southwest, coming up through the Kuskokwim. I should say, no, not Kuskokwim, Bristol Bay. This is the Wood-Tikchik State Park area here. And then along the lower Yukon coast to the Bering Strait. And for Tuesday afternoon, we find IFR conditions over the Gulf, lingering in areas of the Panhandle, Sitka on up towards the inner channels of the north and along the intercoastal mountains, British Columbia. Also still lagging there, the western portion of Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai, Wood-Tikchik State Park area there around those higher hills and mountains, and then up here toward the eastern portion of the Brooks Range up toward Arctic Village, and then out over the northern Bering, including St. Matthew, St. Lawrence, and Nunavik Islands. Now, what we're looking for in terms of pass conditions, Anaktuvik Pass, VFR becoming MVFR on Monday. Adigan, same thing, VFR very early for a short time becoming MVFR. And then as we drop down along the Alaska Range, MVFR conditions early Monday giving way to IFR conditions because of upslope flow with that frontal system approaching. Same thing, Rainy Pass, MVFR, IFR conditions though developing there on Monday. Windy Pass, kind of an interesting spot where may be able to hold on to VFR conditions during the day on Monday. Same thing, Isabel Pass, though between Windy and Isabel Pass, there will likely be an area of MVFR conditions on Monday. And then Metasta Pass, further east, VFR. Dropping down into the Copper River Basin, VFR becoming MVFR at Tanita Pass. And then Portage Pass, we'll see MVFR conditions become IFR, especially as we get into Monday afternoon. And finally, out there in the north end of the Panhandle, Chilkoot and White, MVFR becoming VFR Monday afternoon, early evening. So with low pressure coming up out of the North Pacific and then pulling back here across the southeast Bering, it's going to force the warmest air aloft ahead of the frontal system up into the Gulf. Some of that pushing up into the interior. So whenever you get that milder air coming in across the colder air near the surface, that's going to create potentially an icy mix of precipitation here, lower Yukon Valley, briefly along areas of the Kuskokwim, Bristol Bay coastline as you get inland from there. And then as we look down here through the Gulf, freezing levels aloft rise up 6,000 feet to around 8,000 feet along and south of Haida Gwaii. So we do anticipate areas of moderate icing throughout the interior, west side of the state, Bristol Bay down into the western Gulf, up into Cook Inlet and along the northern, northeastern Gulf Coast to the outer coast there of the Panhandle, where icing will be a little higher up along the northeastern Gulf Coast, above 6,000 feet, above 8,000 feet out over the Gulf, and above 5,000 feet here in the southwest interior to the west of the Alaska Range. We do have a bit of ridging here across areas of the northeast mainland, Alcan border, northwest Canada. We see the winds aloft at 30,000 feet or 250 millibars. Strongest jet core is heading southward. That's a northwesterly flow, upwards of 125 knots over central Canada, bringing it down to 9,000 feet, 700 millibars. We have low circulation out this way over the Bering, and the mid-level circulation is a broad belt of winds of 35 to 45 knots with embedded areas of 50 to even as high as 75 knots here along the Alaska Range. That's why we have those wind advisories and high wind warnings for areas of the Alaska Range. And then as we pull it down to 3,000 feet, with frontal boundary trough coming up here into the Gulf, we have enhanced winds along areas of Prince William Sound. So outside of Hinchinbrook entrance, Kayak Island, there will be some stronger winds also coming into Cook Inlet. And then out here along the west coast, the western slope here of the Brooks Range, down into the western interior around Norton Sound, lower Yukon coast. When we take a look at that, yes, there's going to be widespread areas of moderate turbulence across much of the west, southwest, creeping up into the interior along the Alaska Range, and then also areas of the Gulf here coming in around the entrance of Cook Inlet, and then outside of Hinchinbrook entrance east toward Cape Suckling. There could be isolated severe turbulence, especially there surface to 6,000 feet with some low-level wind shear out over areas of the Gulf.